You won't believe what happened in today's story.
There's a room I can't name, a place I can't visit in my mind without feeling it reach for me. I will never step through that door again. The garage always smelled the same at night: burnt oil, metal dust, and something faintly sweet, like rotten fruit. Earl wiped his hands on a rag that used to be white, then killed the radio. The silence pressed in immediately. Outside, Ashwood's main street lay empty, only the traffic light blinking red to no one. He turned to lock the tool chest, but one of the wrenches was missing. A half-inch, the one he'd just used on the Ford's axle. He frowned. He was alone. Tommy had gone home an hour ago, and the bay doors were locked. The clatter came from the far stall, metal against concrete, too sharp to be accidental. Earl froze. His first thought was a rat, but rats didn't sound like that. He walked to the stall slowly, heart thudding against his ribs. The overhead lights hummed, flickered, then steadied again. On the floor lay the wrench. It hadn't just fallen. It was standing upright, balanced on its end like a coin. Earl didn't breathe. Then, without a hand to touch it, the wrench tipped, spun once, and rolled in a perfect circle before stopping at his boot. Something shifted in the service pit below. He stared at the black gap in the concrete floor, where grease and shadow swallowed everything. He'd worked here 20 years, but tonight it looked deeper, darker, as if it didn't end where it was supposed to. Earl bent down slowly, rag clutched in his fist, and whispered, "Who's there?" The pit answered with a faint scrape, like knuckles dragging along steel. Part 2, blood in the drain. By morning, Earl convinced himself it had been his nerves. Too much coffee, too little sleep. He told no one. But when Tommy rolled up the bay doors, the smell hit them first, stronger than oil, heavier than gasoline, a copper tang that clung to the back of the throat. "Jesus, did something die in here?" Tommy muttered, tugging his cap lower. Earl didn't answer. His eyes had gone to the drain in the center of the floor. A dark stain spread out from it, thicker than grease. Tommy crouched, poking it with a rag. The cloth came back red, wet. "That ain't transmission fluid," he said, and laughed nervously. "Unless Ford's running cars on blood now." Earl knelt beside him. The stain pulsed faintly, as if the concrete itself were breathing. He said nothing, just yanked the rag from Tommy's hand and shoved it deep into the drain. The grate rattled, refusing to swallow it. "Don't touch it again," Earl said, harsher than he meant. Tommy gave him a look. "Man, if this is one of your jokes." But the boy didn't finish. Something thick bubbled up from the drain, forcing the rag back out. It floated there, dripping red, as though the floor had spit it up. Both of them stepped back. The bubbles stopped, the stain was gone. The drain lay clean, as if nothing had ever touched it. Tommy's face had gone pale. "We ain't saying nothing about this, right?" Earl nodded slowly. He wanted to agree. He wanted to forget. But he knew stains don't just disappear, not in Ashwood. Part 3, old stories. By afternoon, business went on as usual. Tires changed, oil swapped, brakes squealed. Customers came and went, none the wiser. Near closing, a familiar rattle echoed up the drive. A rust-bitten Chevy truck rolled in, coughing smoke. Behind the wheel sat Mr. Harlan, oldest man in Ashwood, thin as wire and twice as brittle. "Earl," he croaked, climbing out with effort. "Thought I'd drop her in, won't start cold no more." Earl waved Tommy to the hood, but Harlan didn't move toward the office. Instead, he leaned on the fender, watching, eyes cloudy, sharp all the same. "You ever hear," he began, voice low, "how this shop got built?" Earl stiffened. He didn't like talk like that. "My daddy laid the foundation, 62. Harlan shook his head. "Not what I mean, before that. Ground you're standing on, it was the Miller place. Big red barn, cornfields out back. Folks didn't go near it, said the land was bad." Tommy snorted, buried in the engine. "Bad land, what's that even mean?" Harlan ignored him. His stare never left Earl. "One night the barn caught fire. They never found all the bodies. Some swore they heard screaming under the flames, not from the house, but from the dirt itself. The air in the garage felt heavier, as if the walls were listening. Town needed a new business, so they leveled what was left, poured concrete right over the spot, built your daddy's shop on top." Earl wiped his hands, forcing a laugh. "Stories, you know how kids talk." But Harlan didn't laugh. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "Concrete don't bury everything. Some things stay restless." Tommy straightened from the hood, grease on his face, suddenly uneasy. "Restless like what?" Harlan's gaze slid to the drain in the floor, the one Earl and Tommy hadn't spoken of all day. He just smiled, toothless and knowing, like what you've already seen. Part 4, the dent in the hood. The next morning, a blue sedan pulled in just after sunrise. A woman Earl didn't know climbed out, pale and jittery, clutching her coat as if the September chill might peel her skin away. "It won't stop making noise," she said, pushing the keys into Earl's hand, like something's inside it, scratching. Earl frowned, motioning her toward the waiting bench. He drove the car into the bay himself. The sound began before he even lifted the hood, metal groaning, faint tapping, steady as breath. Tommy wandered over, curious. Mouse nest, maybe. But when Earl popped the hood, no nest waited, just the engine humming low. On the inside of the hood's steel frame, deep scratches lined the metal, too deep for any animal, long grooves like claw marks. Tommy swore under his breath. What the hell could do that? Earl touched one of the grooves. The steel was bent outward, as though something had tried to claw its way free. The tapping stopped, the air thickened. Then the hood slammed shut by itself, rattling the whole car. Tommy jumped back, knocking over a can of oil. Earl's hand still rested on the hood. He felt it then, the dent. A bulge pushing from the inside, perfectly round, pressing upward as though something inside wanted out. It pulsed once, twice, then stilled. Tommy's face had gone pale. "We're not telling her right about this." Earl didn't answer. He kept his palm on the hood, waiting. When he finally lifted his hand, the dent was gone. Smooth steel, no mark, no proof. But his skin burned with the impression of that round shape, still pressing, still trying. And Earl knew the woman's car wasn't the problem. The shop was. Part 5, the spare key. Tommy was the one who found it. They were cleaning up for the night when he reached into his coverall pocket and froze. "Earl," he said slowly, pulling out a single car key on a greasy ring, "this yours?" Earl shook his head. But he knew the key, everyone in town did. The spare for the Reynolds boys' pickup, the one that had been towed in 3 weeks ago after the accident. The truck was still parked out back, bent around the frame like a broken rib cage. The boy hadn't survived. Earl took the key, heavy in his palm. "How the hell did you get this?" Tommy swore he didn't know. "I don't even go near the tow lot, you know that." The key was cold, colder than steel should be. Earl shoved it into his own pocket, trying not to show his hand was shaking. That night, long after Tommy had gone, Earl locked the bay doors, turned off the lights, and went out back. The wrecked truck waited in the shadows, weeds already clawing around the tires. The moon hit the windshield. For a moment, Earl swore he saw a boy's face pressed against the glass, pale and slack-jawed, eyes wide open. He told himself not to look twice, but he did. The windshield was empty. Still, his hand lifted the key. He didn't mean to. It slid into the lock smooth as butter, though no one had tried to start the truck since the accident. The door groaned open. Inside, the driver's seat was wet, not with rain, with something dark, sticky half dried into the fabric. The smell of copper rose up, choking. And when Earl pulled his hand back, the key was gone. Not in the lock, not in his pocket. As if the truck had swallowed it whole. Part 6, engine knocks. The truck should have been dead. No gas, no battery, half the wiring ripped out in the crash. Earl had seen the Reynolds boy's body pulled from it, he knew. But the next morning, before dawn, the noise started. Earl was unlocking the side door when he heard it, a low, uneven thudding from the tow lot, like someone beating a hollow drum. "Knock. Pause. Knock, knock." It came from the truck. He stood in the cold, breath clouding, keys hanging in the lock. The sound was steady, patient, like knuckles against steel. Earl forced himself across the gravel. His boots crunched too loud. He tried not to look at the windshield. The knocks grew faster, sharper, not from under the hood, inside the cab, something hitting from within. "Hell with this," Earl muttered, and yanked the driver's door. Empty. The seat was dry now, no trace of the sticky dark he'd seen the night before. But the steering wheel twitched just slightly, as though an invisible hand had let go of it a second too late. Then the engine coughed. The truck shuddered, headlights flaring weak and yellow, though the battery was gone. The smell of gasoline filled the air, except there was no fuel line to carry it. The knocks became voices. a whispering rhythm, syllables half-formed, like something trying to remember how to speak. Earl slammed the door and stumbled back. The engine died, the whisper stopped. When Tommy arrived an hour later, the truck sat silent in the lot, its hood coated with fresh fingerprints Earl couldn't scrub off. And all day, every time Earl held a wrench, he heard that faint knocking in the back of his skull, like the truck had carried it inside him. Part 7: The Stain That Grows. By Wednesday, Earl had given up trying to ignore it. The floor under Bay 2 had changed. At first it looked like oil dark, wet, spreading from the drain, but oil dried left rings, stains you could scrape. This didn't. It was too dark, almost red when the light hit it. Tommy was the first to notice it creeping wider. "Thought you mopped this, Earl." "I did." He knelt down, dragging a rag across the patch. The cloth came away clean, but the stain stayed, not even damp, just part of the concrete now. By lunch, it had grown another inch. Tommy stopped joking. He kept glancing at it while changing tires, as if waiting for it to move on its own. By late afternoon, it had reached the base of the lift. "Man, this ain't right," Tommy whispered, wiping sweat from his neck. "Concrete don't just spread." Earl said nothing. He was staring at the edges of the stain. They weren't random. They curled and twisted like lines of writing, shapes almost forming letters. When he blinked, the shapes looked different, rearranged. Not English, not anything human. That night after Tommy left, Earl stayed behind. He crouched over the stain with a shop light, tracing the lines with his eyes. And for a second, just a second, he swore the stain shifted toward him. A ripple in the floor, pulling closer, hungry. The shop light flickered. The words rearranged themselves again, sharper now, clear enough to see but not clear enough to understand. Earl turned the light off. He couldn't look any longer. When he stepped back, his boot soles stuck to the concrete with a wet sound, and though he scraped it off, the bottom of his shoe stayed dark, as if it had soaked something up. Part 8: Whispers in the Pit. The pit had always unnerved Earl, even before things started. A long black mouth in the floor, just wide enough to swallow a man. That night the shop was silent except for the buzzing lights. Earl stood at the edge of the pit, staring down. The dark smelled sharper here, rust, rot, something sweet underneath. He crouched, listening. At first only the drip of water somewhere below, then faintly a sound that didn't belong. A whisper. He leaned closer. The concrete was cold beneath his palm. The whisper grew clearer, words broken apart, sliding into each other. Not English, something older, wetter. The pit breathed. He swore he felt it. Air rising, hot and damp, brushing his cheek like a mouth sighing against him. Then came the scrape, nails dragging against steel, the same he'd heard that first night. Slow, deliberate climbing. Earl jerked back, nearly losing his balance. The whisper didn't stop. It was louder now, filling the whole bay, weaving between the humming lights. He couldn't catch the meaning, but the rhythm was wrong. Too many voices speaking at once. Something shifted in the dark. He couldn't see it, but the shape was there, large, bending the shadows in ways shadows shouldn't bend. His knees locked. He forced himself upright, fumbling for the light switch on the wall. The overhead bulbs snapped off. The pit glowed faintly red, as if lit from somewhere below. The whispering swelled, too loud now, voices pressing into his skull, threading into his thoughts. Earl staggered for the door. His hand hit the latch, shoved it open. The whisper cut off instantly. When he turned back, the pit was dark again, ordinary. Only the rag he'd left on the floor was gone, dragged into the hole without a sound. Part 9: The Insurance Man. The garage door creaked before Earl could push it all the way open. Inside stood a man in a dark suit, polished and sharp, like he'd just stepped off a magazine cover. His face was smooth, almost too smooth, with eyes too cold to be friendly. "Earl Whitman," his voice was even, almost hissing. Earl shrugged. "That's me. How can I help?" "I'm from Ashwood Mutual," the man said, handing over a business card. "I'm checking on recent incidents involving vehicles you've serviced. Accidents, damage. I need to review your records." Tommy, standing nearby, frowned. "We've already submitted all the paperwork, everything documented." The man smiled thinly. A review never hurts, especially when insurance payouts are large, or when cars start behaving strangely after repairs. Earl's stomach tightened. "What do you mean by that?" The man's gaze slowly swept the garage. He paused at the stain under the lift, though he didn't ask about it. I know about the stains, I know about the disappearances, I know about the whispers in the pit. Earl froze. You, how do you know that? The man tilted his head slightly. I just observe. Sometimes machines remember, sometimes people forget. Not everyone survives when machines remember more than they should. Tommy stepped forward. Are you joking? The man raised a hand, calm, deliberate. I'm not joking. I'm here to make sure everything is in order, no surprises. Sometimes people vanish, sometimes machines break themselves and insurers lose money. I want to prevent that. Earl felt a cold sweat run down his spine. This man was not here by accident. He stepped closer to the pit. His eyes glinted in the darkness. One more warning, stay away from the edge. Some things buried under the concrete don't like spectators. With that, he turned and left. The door closed behind him, leaving the garage empty, but the air felt thick, as if the concrete itself had swallowed a warning. Tommy looked down at the floor. The stain beneath the lift seemed darker now, as though it had absorbed the tension left behind. We'll deal with it, Earl said, though he wasn't certain he believed it. And something in the shop now knew they were being watched. Part 10. Broken Glass. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when the first car arrived, a cherry-red coupe Earl didn't recognize. Its driver was a young man, nervous, constantly checking his rearview mirror as though someone were following him. It's the windshield, he said, voice tight. I keep seeing things, reflections, movements, faces, not mine. Earl motioned for Tommy to bring it into Bay 1. The moment the hood lifted, the car seemed to sigh, metal creaking softly. The windshield glimmered in the morning light. Earl frowned. The glass wasn't cracked, not really, but there were images dancing across its surface. Faces flickering in and out of focus, some young, some old, all twisted in silent screams. Tommy leaned closer. Is that real? Earl didn't answer. He reached out, fingertips just brushing the glass. The faces sharpened, their mouths opening wide, but no sound came. Only a pressure in Earl's chest, like the car was pushing at him, trying to speak through his skin. Suddenly the images shifted. One face looked directly at him, pale, hollow-eyed, unmistakably human. Then the glass rippled like liquid and the face disappeared. The young man flinched. I told you, it's not me, someone S in there. Earl stepped back. It's the car. His voice trembled despite his best effort to stay calm. Something S in the car. The windshield cracked, thin lines spiderwebbing across the surface, but no sound of breaking glass. The faces continued to swirl behind the fractures, staring, waiting. Tommy grabbed a wrench. We should smash it now. Earl shook his head. No, that won't help. It never does. For a moment, silence fell over the garage, broken only by the low hum of the overhead lights. Then the faces all turned toward the service pit. The car shivered, the metal groaned. Earl knew the pit was calling. Whatever haunted the shop, the stains, the whispers, the restless machines, was gathering strength. The young man dropped his keys and bolted, leaving the coupe idling in the bay. The windshield stared back at Earl blank, reflecting his own wide-eyed face. And somewhere beneath the floor, something waited, patient, its presence heavy as oil and iron.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to see more stories.